Welcome to the World News, your daily dose of stories around the globe. I'm Randolf Jamias, here in Naypyidaw. Let's start the news with a big bang. Hundreds of thousands of locals in Chinese Taipei joined National Day celebrations to mark the 101st anniversary of the country's foundation on Wednesday. Speaking in front of the presidential palace, President Ma Ying-jeou pledged to improve lives of the people. His speech was followed by a military air show with helicopters carrying the country's flags and a happy birthday sign. A military band performed in front of the presidential palace. Ma Ying-jeou has been pursuing landmark trade deals with Beijing and maintaining the status quo under three principles of no unification, no independence, and no use of power. Moving on, let's visit Japan. A delegation, including the International Monetary Fund's Managing Director Christine Lagarde and World Bank President Jim Yong Kim on Wednesday, paid a visit to Sendai in northeast Japan, which was devastated by the tsunami last year. The World Bank said more than 19,000 people were killed or missing, and infrastructure totaling $200 billion was damaged or destroyed. Both Kim and Lagarde said they were impressed by the spirit of the Japanese had shown in light of the disaster. This week, Japan is scheduled to host the IMF and World Bank annual meetings for the first time in nearly half a century. About 20,000 people are expected to attend the event, making it one of the world's largest international conferences.
Solidarity shown here. If we can have that kind of solidarity every day for all the different countries that struggle under disasters like this, then I think the world will be a much better place.
Feeling of sorrow, but at the same time, when you listen to the guys explaining how they go about reconstructing and dealing with all of the damages and trying to be positive about it, it's just very, very impressive. So it's a mixture of both, sorrow and huge admiration for what they're doing.
Looks like more Nobel Prizes are given away. U.S. physicist David Weinland was one of the two scientists awarded the Nobel Prize on Tuesday for finding ways to measure quantum particles without destroying them, which would make it possible to build a new kind of computer far more powerful than any seen before. Weinland and his co-winner, Serge Haroche of France, both 68, found ways to manipulate the very smallest particles of matter and light to observe strange behavior that previously could only be imagined in equations and experiments. Weinland has described his own work as a parlor trick that performed the seemingly magical feat, or putting an object in two places at once. Other scientists praised the achievements as bringing to life the wildest dreams of science fiction.
This morning, someone pointed me to a web page where I was on the same page as Lady Gaga. So I feel that I've really arrived here. No, without question, this is a big honor, and it doesn't happen just with a single person like me, and a lot of people have been. I've had the pleasure to work with a lot of people over the years, so those many people share in this honor. What we've been able to progressively do, we and other groups throughout the world, over the years, we've basically been able to control their quantum properties with increasing precision. So Tom mentioned that this has applications in atomic clocks. So using these techniques, we've progressively been able to make more and more accurate atomic clocks. Something that's happened in the last 15 years or so is that we've been able to also apply these control techniques to start to play games where these quantum properties might be used in a computer, so-called quantum computer. And I would have to say, at this point, I wouldn't recommend anybody buy stock in a quantum computing company, but I think we're optimistic that as the technology improves over the years, that this quantum computer really will bring unique capabilities to computing.
Now in China, something about caring for the elderly. China's grassroots Medicare services and medical insurance cover are said to be expanded. This is being done to meet the demands of the country's aging population, as well as improve standards of healthcare, particularly for the elderly.
The number of people over 60 reached a staggering 178 million by the end of 2010. That is about 13% of the country's entire population. At a press conference this morning, the ministry announced plans to deepen medical reforms, enhancing health service provision for the elderly. Now, these new plans include expansion of hospital as well as rehabilitation services, as well as care centers. Today, remember, is World Mental Health Day. The ministry has announced an investment of 6 million yuan to train mental health professionals over the next year. Over the last couple of years, China has invested a little over 15 million yuan in mental health support services. Now, the latest statistics say around 4% of China's elderly population currently suffer from Alzheimer's disease, and about 4.5% of people over 65 here in Beijing suffer from some form of depression.
And talking about health, Brazil has another way of cancer awareness. Rio de Janeiro's iconic Christ the Redeemer statue was lit up in pink on Tuesday night to mark the start of Breast Cancer Awareness Month. The iconic 130-foot monument, which looks out over Rio's scenic beaches and mountains, was bathed in pink light as breast cancer survivors and campaigners gathered to watch this spectacle. Breast cancer is the second most diagnosed cancer in the world. According to latest report, around 53,000 women will be diagnosed with this cancer in the country. As part of what being billed in Brazil as Pink October Initiative, Brazilian health workers are planning to stage several events during the month to draw attention to breast cancer and encourage women to get regular mammograms. In our follow-up news with the world-breaking records attempt in skydiving, Felix Baumgartner needs to wait for another day and wait for favorable winds. Technicians said strong winds could prevent his ultra-thin balloon from functioning. We have more of this report.
Felix Baumgartner will have to wait before breaking a skydiving record. 43-year-old Fearless Felix had planned to jump from an altitude of 120,000 feet. But technicians say strong winds would have prevented his ultra-thin balloon from functioning.
And that was a total disappointment, honestly. But as long as we have a spare balloon and as long as we have more launch opportunities, I'm good.
The reality is we've got a person's life at stake, and so our primary concern is making sure that we're launching in the best conditions possible to be able to get him into the air.
Baumgartner wants to break the current record for the highest altitude free fall of more than 102,000 feet. If successful, he'd be the first parachutist to break the sound barrier. A Red Bull Stratus team spokesperson said the next earliest launch attempt would be Thursday.
And for our last story in this segment, if you don't fancy any of wines available at your local supermarket, why not make your own? That's what one couple in a residential part of Bordeaux have been doing for 10 years, and they've now produced a book to help other budding winemakers follow their footsteps.
It's a vintage unlike any other, a wine that comes straight from this residential suburb of Bordeaux. Around 10 years ago, Berenice and Alain turned a corner of their city garden into a micro vineyard, making their own fine wines just for themselves and a few friends.
We did it because we had a cedar tree which was covering the whole garden and which was blown down in the storms of 1999. So we found ourselves with this piece of land where everything was demolished. And I thought, instead of doing a lawn, let's plant some vines.
70 feet of Merlot and Cabernet grapes were duly put in. A few years later, in 2005, their first harvest produced barely 8 kilograms of grapes, and the resulting tipple was dubious at best. Berenice, a molecular biologist by trade, decided to step in and train herself up in the latest vinicultural techniques.
le déguster, donc tout cela, ça me plaisait beaucoup. Mais je voulais...
I've always loved tastings and fine wines, but I also wanted to know about wine making techniques and terroir, and how all that affects the creation of a good wine. So I thought, well, if you want...
Rien de tel que de faire ça moi-même.
The result was Microvino, a how-to guide about growing, fermenting and bottling your own wine for smallholders with up to 100 kilos of grapes to play with. But be warned, you'll need plenty of free time for this hobby, and you can say goodbye to your summer holidays.
Si c'était mon métier,
if this was actually my job, I'd find it quite restrictive. You've got to be here all over summer because that's the most sensitive time for the vines.
donc il faut y être.
Come harvest though, and it's a good excuse to get friends round to help out with gathering and sorting the grapes before crushing them by foot in the traditional manner. And Alain and Berenice have learned a few things since they started, meaning the wines themselves have become quite a coveted reward as well.
Let's have a toast for that. Thanks for the company. We'll be right back for more. Please stay with us.